Doctors of Reddit, what made you say how the duck is this person still alive? When I was in college, there was a kid that exited a freeway at near freeway speed. Problem was, it was a construction zone at night, no lights, and it wasn't supposed to be an open exit. Drove right into a pile of rebar. One of the poles went through the car into his face and pinned him to the seat through his head. A couple of years later, I was in grad school, in anatomy seminar, and the surgeon presented that kid's case as a study. Not only did he live, the rebar had slid right past the base of the brain/spinal column. It was so close, they had to twist it out like a screw because the ribbing on the bar threatened nerve damage. They literally rebuilt this kid's skull around his brain. His recovery photo was a totally normal kid smiling. He had a small scar on his chin. I say kid, but he was like 17, just to be clear. Edit: a couple of people looked up the story and posted it in the responses. For the curious, be warned, there is one photo you may find disturbing. I had some minor details wrong, but I hope I'm forgiven since it was 15 years ago. Edit 2, everyone keeps bringing up Phineas Gage, but this guy didn't have any brain damage at all. I'm not a doctor, but the story of Lemmy Kilmister of Motorhead always makes me go, how did he live that long? Basically, he smoked every day since he was about 11, drank an entire bottle of Jack mixed with Coke every day, and when he was diagnosed with diabetes in 2015 he switched to a bottle of vodka every day. He never ate healthy, only exercise he got was performing, and refused to drink water when his doctor said he was dehydrated. He just added more ice to his Jack and Coke. But astonishingly, even in his 60s, in an interview he said he just went down to the doctor and he said his lungs were fine, liver was fine, essentially in pretty much perfect health, not even tinnitus or hearing difficulties despite Motorhead concerts being said to be some of the loudest. Almost all his health problems came during the last 2 to 3 years of his life, and they can mostly be attributed to old age, not lifestyle. He died in 2015 just after his 70th birthday, to the shock of everyone because he was drinking and partying just a couple days beforehand. This guy was seriously indestructible and it's a miracle he lived to his age. Edit: it's Jack and Coke, not rum and Coke, man face bombing. As a student, had a young guy come in who self-inflicted a 22 to the inside of his mouth and passed out. Awoke the next morning, didn't recall the night prior, went to work. 2 hours into work he says he's not feeling right and starts acting odd. Co-workers call EMS. They take him in and the ED is working him up and in the process notices a mix of clear fluid and blood in the back of his mouth. They call ENT and get a CT head. Shows 11 or so bullet fragments throughout his noggin. The guy was acting by the time completely unfazed. I was very fazed. An unlucky/lucky guy forgot his keys and was climbing back into his own apartment through the window. His cousin/friend thought that he was an intruder and pointed a gun at him and pulled the trigger as the unlucky/lucky guy opened his mouth to say don't shoot. The bullet went into his mouth and clean exited the back of his neck. After surgery, he was totally fine in a few days, somehow missed all major structures. Didn't even chip a tooth. Really pissed at his cousin. From my neurosurgery rotation in med school. Edit: THX for my first silver and gold, my second most upvoted comment has 33 votes, so 37k is pretty surprising. Unlike the bullet, this comment hit a nerve. Edit 2, I didn't delve into why, but for some reason the patient didn't know that his friend/cousin was in the patient's apartment, and the patient assumed that he was locked out. Edit 3, I think I have a poor sense of what is interesting in medicine to the general public. This was interesting enough for me to remember from med school, definitely made it to med students can't help talking about medicine even at parties, but it never struck me as that interesting. Edit 4, this has forced me to learn how to do a hard return. Edit 5, maybe too many edits is rude? Relatively untutored in the ways of Reddit. Not a doctor but a student nurse. I had a patient come into the psych ward from the emergency department after he had cut off his own right arm from the elbow down. With a ducking chainsaw. He only survived because he apparently had some kind of rare clotting disorder that prevented him from bleeding to death. He was severely schizophrenic and believed that his arm was going to grow back. Edit: I didn't expect this to blow up the way it did. I love this story because my dad was a psychiatrist, and I finally have something way weirder than any of the tales of his profession he ever told. Happy you all found it as interesting as I did. Not a doctor, but the person everyone asked, how the duck is this person still alive? 2. Got my driver's license late, at age of 25. 2 months later I'm driving into town when I lose control of the car. Front right tire popped for no apparent reason. It swirls out on the right side of the road. I pull back and when I get back on the road the car flips sideways and goes straight out to the trees. I was doing 90 kilometers per hour, 60 miles per hour-ish, knocked down a couple of smaller trees and ended up wrapped around a larger one. So many things went right for me to not die. The driver's seat gave into the pressure and folded back, so when the roof got pushed in from the tree it didn't crush me. The angle I was in due to the seat giving in meant that there was about half an inch room between my head and ceiling of the car. Survival instincts kicked in and I managed to squeeze out of a broken window without too much damage, walked out to the side of the road where a car came driving back. He was driving the direction I was but was ahead of me, saw smoke from the dry dirt where I crashed, turned around and went to help me. He called 911, second car to show up was a nurse on her way to work at the hospital, so she had a first aid kit and patched my 2 cuts up. Next thing I know firefighters and police and ambulance show up and no one believes I'm the driver of the car wrapped around that tree, because that person should be dead. I knew 2 of the firefighters personally and they told me later on that they saw it was my car and were already prepared to find my dead body in the car when they arrived, and I sat there on the ground and said hey Kevin and Marcus. The relief in their face when they saw me was quite fun. Got in the ambulance, they pumped morphine in me. I joked all the way to the hospital and the doctor asked if he could share my story with people because I was a ducking legend. Edit. Holy crap, these blew up. Thanks for my first gold as well. Car. VW Model 2. Reason for morphine. Precautionary due to me being in shock and actually my leg did hurt. They were also worried about spinal injuries. Thanks for all the kind words as well. Not a doctor, but firefighter. We had a 30-year-old male put a shotgun in his mouth pointing up to his nose, pull the trigger and survive. We show up, work him, he's breathing, but missing most of his face and we transport him. He survives and we are all amazed. 3 months later he does it again, but a .22 to the temple, it bounced around and exited through his eye. He survives again. With some mental deficits and a glass eye, but still one of the craziest I've seen. My dad walked a mile to see a friend and tried to walk up the stairs. Couldn't get up 1 step. Walked back 1 mile to his office, looked up who his doctor was, since he hadn't seen one in 20 years, and drove there. No appointment. Doctor hooks him up to an EKG, but it's fine. Tells him there's a cardiologist next door, it's the end of the day, they'll see him. Just in case. They hook him up to a blood pressure monitor while he's on a treadmill. The monitor is behind him, he can't see it. He starts walking. They set a countdown timer for 3 minutes, and about 30 seconds in, one of the nurses steps out of the room. My dad is watching the timer and it counts down to 0. He feels fine and figures he's going home, but the door opens and 2 ambulance attendants are wheeling in a gurney. While he was on the treadmill, his blood pressure dropped to 0, then restarted, then dropped to 0 again. The nurse who stepped out of the room dialed 911. They let him finish because they figured as soon as he stopped, the heart attack would start in earnest. Quadruple bypass later and he lived, but note, he said he never felt the same. A bypass is not a panacea. Edit. Panacea solution to all problems. Apparently, not a commonly used word. Older woman called 911 for chest pain. Her vital signs were crap and she had the look that anyone who's ever seen a patient about to die will recognize instantly. Her EKG suggested multiple blockages in her coronary arteries, and we had to put her on a ventilator shortly after she got to the ER because she deteriorated so quickly. Cath lab confirmed the EKG findings, complete blockage of one artery and 99% blockage of 2 other major arteries. Unfortunately it was too extensive to resolve with PCI, so the only option was to fly her to the university hospital in the city for an emergent triple bypass. It turned out that she'd had multiple episodes like this, but not quite as severe, over the last 6 months and had refused bypass surgery not once, not twice, but 3 times in favor of a Mediterranean diet. Well, at this point she didn't have much say anymore and family agreed, so off to the OR she went. I took care of her again about 4 months later and she actually seemed to have made a remarkable recovery. Obligatory, not mine, but Dad was an ER doc and one he told a lot when I was present for were. A guy with a blood alcohol level of 0.85 was basically dead on a gurney, not breathing. Suddenly, this ducker sits up and punches my dad right in the face, says turn those damn lights off. And then lays back down and passes out. Apparently, he was a massive alcoholic and no one knew how he was still alive and he had some kind of crazy tolerance built up. Car accident ahead of us on the freeway one day. Dad goes running up so I see none of the gore, but driver is suspended in his seat in a flipped over car. The car and the guy were both ripped in half at about midsection. Dad goes to work on this guy who is fully conscious and rather concerned he's missing everything below his hips. Being upside down kept enough blood in the guy's brain that he was awake for a while, long enough to landed a helo on the highway and tried to fly him to the hospital. He didn't make it, and I have never seen so much blood in my life. Dad left his clothes on the side of the road after giving the highway patrol a statement, dropped me at school in his underwear. None of this struck him as strange at all.